What if the people you admire most for their discipline aren't actually more motivated than you? What if they're often less motivated? Most people believe discipline comes from having stronger willpower, more self-control, or some rare ability to stay focused when everyone else gives up. But psychology tells a very different story. In fact, some of the most disciplined people you know don't wake up feeling inspired. They don't always want to go to the gym. They don't always feel like working. They don't always feel confident. Yet somehow, they keep showing up. And that's where the mystery begins. Because if discipline isn't motivation, then what is it? Why can two people set the exact same goal, make the exact same promise to themselves, and yet one follows through while the other quits within weeks? Why do some people seem almost immune to procrastination? And why do highly disciplined people often think in ways that seem completely backwards to everyone else? In this video, we'll break down the psychology of disciplined people, uncover the hidden mental shifts that make consistency possible, and explore why the habits that look effortless on the outside are usually built on a very different foundation beneath the surface. Because once you understand what discipline really is, you'll never look at motivation the same way again. A few years ago, a man decided he was finally going to get in shape. He bought new workout clothes, downloaded a fitness app, watched motivational videos every morning, and promised himself that this time would be different. For 2 weeks, he was unstoppable. Then work became stressful. He missed one workout, then another. A month later, he was back where he started, wondering why he could never stay consistent. What frustrated him most was watching a colleague who exercised every week, ate well, and seemed incredibly disciplined. One day he asked him his secret. The answer surprised him. The colleague laughed and said, "I don't have more motivation than you. Most days I don't feel like doing it either." And that raises a fascinating question. If disciplined people don't rely on motivation, then what exactly are they relying on? The motivation myth. Most people think discipline starts with motivation. They imagine disciplined people waking up every morning full of energy, excitement, and determination. But if you talk to people who consistently achieve difficult goals, you'll notice something surprising. They often don't feel motivated when they take action. In fact, many psychologists argue that motivation is one of the least reliable drivers of behavior because motivation is emotional, and emotions change constantly. Think about it. You feel motivated after watching an inspiring video. You feel motivated at the beginning of a new year. You feel motivated after a breakthrough conversation. But motivation fades. Life gets busy, stress appears, energy drops, and that's where most people stop. Disciplined people understand something different. They don't ask themselves, "Do I feel like doing this today?" They ask, "Is this what I do?" That small shift changes everything. Because the moment behavior becomes part of your identity, it stops depending entirely on your emotions. And that leads us to the first psychological principle behind discipline. Delayed gratification, the ability to sacrifice today for tomorrow. One of the strongest predictors of discipline is something psychologists call delayed gratification. The ability to tolerate a smaller reward now in exchange for a larger reward later. At first glance, this sounds simple. But your brain isn't naturally designed for it. Your brain evolved to value immediate rewards, immediate pleasure, immediate comfort, immediate certainty. This is why scrolling social media feels easier than reading a book. Why ordering takeaway feels easier than cooking. Why sleeping in feels easier than exercising. The reward happens immediately. The benefit happens later. Disciplined people aren't immune to these temptations. They simply see the future differently. When most people look at a decision, they see today's discomfort. Disciplined people see tomorrow's outcome. A workout isn't just a workout. It's future health. Saving money isn't just sacrifice. It's future freedom. Studying isn't just effort. It's future opportunity. In other words, disciplined people have trained themselves to emotionally connect with long-term rewards that most people only understand intellectually. And that's a powerful distinction. Because behavior changes when the future feels real. Identity-based habits. They become the type of person who does the thing. Here's where discipline becomes even more interesting. Most people focus on goals. Disciplined people focus on identity. The average person says, "I want to run 3 times a week." A disciplined person thinks, I am someone who takes care of my body. The average person says, I want to write a book. A disciplined person thinks, I am a writer. At first, this may sound like semantics, but psychology suggests otherwise. Human beings are strongly motivated to behave consistently with who they believe they are. Once a behavior becomes attached to identity, not doing it begins to feel uncomfortable. Imagine someone who genuinely sees themselves as an honest person. They don't wake up every day debating whether they should tell the truth. Their identity already made the decision. The same thing happens with discipline. Highly disciplined people often remove decision-making from the equation. The behavior becomes part of who they are. And when identity drives behavior, consistency becomes far easier than relying on willpower alone. But there's another factor most people completely overlook, and it may be the most important one of all. Environment design, the secret most people never notice. People often assume discipline is an internal battle, a fight between willpower and temptation. But many disciplined people don't win because they have stronger willpower. They win because they design their environments differently. Look closely and you'll notice something. The disciplined person doesn't keep junk food within arm's reach. The writer removes distractions before starting work. The person who wants to exercise prepares their clothes the night before. The student leaves their phone in another room. From the outside, these actions seem small, but psychologically, they're incredibly powerful. Because behavior is heavily influenced by friction. The harder something is to do, the less likely you'll do it. The easier something is to do, the more likely you'll do it. Most people try to become stronger than temptation. Disciplined people make temptation weaker. They build systems that make good decisions easier and bad decisions harder. And this leads directly into 3 mental shifts that separate disciplined people from everyone else. Mental shift. Number 1. They stop trusting their future selves. Most people constantly make deals with their future selves. I'll start tomorrow. I'll be more focused next week. I'll make up for it later. Disciplined people know something most people learn the hard way. Your future self is usually very similar to your current self. The same distractions will exist. The same excuses will appear. The same challenges will show up. So instead of hoping future discipline will arrive, they act now. They remove the need for heroic effort later. And that mindset alone prevents countless cycles of procrastination. Mental shift number 2, they expect resistance. Many people believe something is wrong when a task feels difficult. Disciplined people don't. They expect resistance. They expect discomfort. They expect boredom. They expect days when they don't feel like showing up. Because of that expectation, they aren't shocked when those feelings appear. And this is crucial. People often quit because they interpret discomfort as a signal to stop. Disciplined people interpret discomfort as evidence that they're doing something meaningful. The resistance doesn't surprise them. It's part of the process. Mental shift number 3. They focus on winning the day. One reason people struggle with discipline is that they become overwhelmed by the size of their goals. Lose 50 pounds, build a business, write a book, save a year's salary. The goal becomes so large that the brain perceives it as distant and uncertain. Disciplined people often shrink the focus. Instead of obsessing over the mountain, they focus on the next step, the next workout, the next page, the next task, the next decision. Because discipline is rarely built through massive actions. It's built through thousands of ordinary choices repeated consistently over time. And that's where the final lesson emerges. How to build discipline without relying on willpower. If there's one thing to remember from this video, it's this. Discipline is not a personality trait. It's not something a lucky few are born with. And it's certainly not evidence that some people are simply stronger than others. Discipline is a psychological system, a combination of identity, environment, delayed gratification, and repeated behavior working together over time. And once you understand that, something interesting happens. You stop asking, how do I become more disciplined? And you start asking, how do I make disciplined behavior easier to repeat? Because that's the question disciplined people are constantly answering. Think about someone who wants to start reading every day. Most people imagine success looks like forcing themselves to read for an hour every night. A disciplined person thinks differently. They might start with 5 pages, not because 5 pages is impressive, because 5 pages is repeatable. And repeatable behaviors become habits. Habits become identities, and identities eventually become lifestyles. This is why disciplined people often look less ambitious than everyone else in the beginning. While others chase dramatic transformations, they focus on consistency. They understand that small actions repeated hundreds of times will almost always outperform occasional bursts of motivation. So start smaller than you think you need to. Make the behavior easy. Make it obvious. Make it difficult to avoid. Remove unnecessary friction. If you want to exercise, prepare your clothes the night before. If you want to write, open the document before you go to bed. If you want to spend less time on your phone, make reaching for it slightly harder than reaching for something else. These tiny adjustments may seem insignificant, but human behavior is often shaped by tiny advantages repeated over and over again. And perhaps most importantly, stop waiting to feel motivated. Because this is where most people get trapped. They believe action follows motivation. They believe they need to feel inspired before they can begin. But psychology suggests the opposite is often true. Action creates motivation far more often than motivation creates action. Think about the last time you procrastinated on something important. Before starting, the task felt heavy, difficult, exhausting. But once you began, something changed. The resistance started to fade. Momentum appeared. The task suddenly felt more manageable than your mind had predicted. That's because motivation often arrives after movement, not before it. Disciplined people understand this. They don't wait for the perfect mood. They don't wait for confidence, and they don't wait for certainty. They start, even when they don't feel like it, especially when they don't feel like it, because they know something most people eventually learn the hard way. The first step is usually the hardest part, not because the work is difficult, because the mind is trying to keep you comfortable. And the moment you learn to take action before you feel ready, discipline stops feeling like a mystery. It starts feeling like a skill that can be practiced, a skill that can be strengthened, and a skill that almost anyone can build. If you found yourself somewhere in this video, let me know in the comments. Which of these mental shifts do you struggle with most? Is it delayed gratification, staying consistent when motivation disappears, or simply believing you can become the kind of person who follows through on what they start? And if you're interested in understanding the hidden psychology behind human behavior, subscribe to The Wired Mind. Because every week we break down the patterns, habits, and psychological mechanisms that quietly shape how people think, feel, and act. And if there's one final piece of this puzzle that most people miss, it's this. Discipline isn't just about what you do, it's also about what you don't need from other people. Because many people struggle to stay consistent for a hidden reason. They're constantly looking outside themselves for approval, validation, reassurance, or permission before they act. The more your behavior depends on external validation, the harder it becomes to stay disciplined when that validation disappears. That's why some people can keep showing up even when nobody notices, nobody applauds, and nobody encourages them. If you've ever wondered how people develop that kind of internal stability, watch our video on the psychology of people who don't seek validation. Because understanding where your motivation comes from may explain more about your discipline than you realize.